25 of Silicon Valley's best developers couldn't stop a millionaire's company from bleeding money. Then a quiet 11-year-old boy spotted what they all missed. Marcus Chen sat in the corner of Tech Forward's gleaming headquarters in downtown Seattle, his worn sneakers barely touching the floor of the ergonomic chair. The glass-walled conference room buzzed with tension as developers frantically typed, their faces illuminated by laptop screens displaying endless lines of code. His mother, Sarah Chen, pushed her cleaning cart past the doorway, careful not to disturb the emergency meeting inside. But Marcus wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this building. Not on a school night. Definitely not in the middle of what the hushed voices were calling the biggest crisis in company history. "Mom, I'll just wait here quietly," he had promised 2 hours ago when she couldn't find a babysitter. "I'll do my homework. You won't even know I'm here." Now, watching the panic unfold through the conference room's transparent walls, Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. He had seen this before. 8 months ago. Different company, different people, but the same desperate energy. The same kind of emergency that had killed his father. James Reynolds, the millionaire founder and CEO of Tech Forward, stood at the head of the conference table, his designer suit rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. At 42, he had built his company from nothing, creating a financial software platform used by over 10,000 small businesses across America. But tonight, that empire was crumbling. "Explain to me," Reynolds said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury, "how we've lost $3 million in the last 72 hours because of a bug that none of you can find." The head of engineering, Dr. Patricia Williams, a MIT graduate with 20 years of experience, shook her head. "James, we've had 25 senior developers working around the clock, the best minds in the industry. We've run every diagnostic, checked every line of code, reviewed every recent deployment. The bug is sophisticated beyond anything we've encountered." "Sophisticated?" Reynolds slammed his hand on the table. "It's costing us $40,000 an hour. Our clients are losing transactions. The media is starting to ask questions. Our stock price is tanking. I need solutions, not excuses." Marcus flinched at the anger in the man's voice. It reminded him too much of Mr. Peterson, his father's old boss, 3 weeks before his dad collapsed. Sarah Chen appeared at the conference room door, ready to empty the trash bins, but Reynolds waved her away impatiently. "Not now. We're in crisis mode here." She retreated quietly, catching Marcus's eye, and mouthing, "Stay there." He nodded, turning his attention back to his math homework. But his ears stayed tuned to the conversation bleeding through the glass walls. "The pattern is completely random," another developer was saying. "Transactions fail without any discernible logic. Sometimes it's amounts over $10,000. Sometimes it's specific user accounts. Sometimes it seems tied to time of day, but then it breaks that pattern too." "What about the audit logs?" someone asked. "Clean. Completely clean. Whoever designed this bug knew exactly how to hide their tracks." Marcus's pencil stopped mid-equation. Whoever designed this, not whatever caused this. They thought it was intentional, just like they had thought about his father's last project. David Chen had been a senior programmer at Data Sync Solutions, a smaller fintech company. Marcus remembered his father's increasing stress, the late nights, the worried conversations with Mom that stopped whenever Marcus entered the room. Then came the accusations that David had written faulty code deliberately, that he had been negligent, that the company's losses were his fault. David had tried to prove his innocence, spent every waking hour analyzing code, searching for the real problem. But the stress had been too much. Heart attack at 38. Gone before the ambulance arrived. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. But Marcus knew better. The system had killed his father just as surely as any disease. And now he was watching it happen again. "Mr. Reynolds," Dr. Williams was saying, "I think we need to consider the possibility of sabotage. Someone with intimate knowledge of our system could have planted this deliberately." "You mean an inside job?" Reynolds's face paled. Someone on our team? It's the only explanation that makes sense. The bug is too precise, too well hidden. It's not a mistake, it's a weapon. The room fell silent. Marcus watched as the developers exchanged suspicious glances. Trust, already strained, began to fracture. His mother reappeared, this time with her supervisor, both carrying supplies to restock the kitchen area adjacent to the conference room. Sarah moved efficiently, invisibly, the way she had learned to move in the 8 months since David's death. Marcus had learned to be invisible too. The scholarship kid at his private school, there only because his dad's old boss had felt guilty enough to pay for 1 year of tuition. After that, well, they'd cross that bridge when they came to it. "We're implementing a code freeze," Reynolds announced. "No one touches the production environment until we find this bug. Everyone's access logs will be audited, no exceptions." As the meeting continued, Marcus tried to focus on his homework, but his mind kept drifting to his father's last words to him. They had been sitting at this very building's public cafeteria back when it was DataSync Solutions headquarters. Tech Forward had bought the space 6 months ago, renovated it completely. "Marcus," his father had said, his eyes tired but gentle, "remember what I taught you about patterns. Everything in programming is patterns. When something doesn't make sense, you're not looking at it the right way yet." His father had shown him a simple game that day, a pattern-matching puzzle that helped teach basic programming concepts. Marcus had been fascinated, spending hours trying to solve increasingly complex challenges. Now, listening to the developers describe the random, unpredictable nature of the bug, something nagged at Marcus's mind. Random wasn't random. His father had taught him that. Even chaos had underlying patterns. The meeting broke up near midnight. Exhausted developers filed out, some heading home, others to their desks to continue working. Reynolds remained, staring at his laptop screen, his face haggard. Sarah finished cleaning and collected Marcus. "Come on, sweetheart, way past your bedtime." As they walked toward the elevator, Marcus turned back to look at the conference room. Through the glass, he could see Reynolds slumped in his chair, the weight of potential ruin on his shoulders. And in that moment, Marcus made a decision. His father couldn't clear his own name, couldn't prove the bug that ruined his reputation wasn't his fault. But maybe, just maybe, Marcus could help solve this one. Maybe he could stop someone else's life from being destroyed by code they didn't write and accusations they didn't deserve. Over the next 3 days, Marcus became a shadow in Tech Forward's hallways. His mother worked the evening shift, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., cleaning the offices after the day staff left. Marcus came with her, officially doing homework in the break room, but actually paying attention to everything happening around him. The crisis deepened. Another 2 million lost. Clients threatening lawsuits. The board calling emergency meetings. And the developers, despite their expertise and experience, remained baffled. Marcus started taking notes. He'd learned basic programming from his father, enough to understand the conversations he overheard. The bug seemed to target financial transactions, but the pattern was inconsistent. Sometimes large amounts, sometimes small, sometimes new clients, sometimes long-standing ones. On Thursday night, Marcus was sitting in his usual corner when he overheard 2 junior developers talking by the coffee machine. "It's like the system knows exactly which transactions will hurt us most," one said. "It's not just random failures, it's strategic. That's what's so creepy about it. How does code know what we care about?" After they left, Marcus pulled out his notebook. Strategic. Not random, but strategic. What if the pattern wasn't in the data, but in the impact? He thought about his father's pattern game. The trick was never to look at what was happening, but why it was happening. Effect before cause. Friday evening, the crisis reached a breaking point. Reynolds called another emergency meeting, this time with the company's lawyers present. The talk was of bankruptcy protection, of selling the company, of cutting losses. Marcus sat in his corner, invisible as always, but his mind was racing. He had been reviewing his notes, looking for the pattern everyone else was missing, and then he saw it. The failures weren't random, they were scheduled. Every major transaction loss corresponded with specific time intervals. 3:17 a.m., 7:42 a.m., 11:33 a.m., 3:19 p.m., 8:47 p.m. Different times, but if you looked at them in sequence over 3 days, they created a pattern, a code. His hands shook as he pulled out his father's old laptop, the one his mom had let him keep. He opened the pattern-matching game his dad had shown him and input the time sequences. The game's algorithm processed the numbers, looking for mathematical relationships. And there it was. Each timestamp, when converted to total minutes from midnight and then processed through a specific mathematical function, spelled out coordinates. Not geographic coordinates, but file system coordinates. Someone had embedded a message in the attack pattern itself. Marcus's heart pounded. He needed to tell someone. But who? The adults had ignored him completely, barely registering his presence. His mother had no authority here, and every minute he waited, the company lost more money. He made his way to the conference room, his notebook clutched in his hands. Through the glass, he could see Reynolds with his head in his hands, lawyers shuffling papers, developers arguing. Marcus knocked softly. No one noticed. He knocked louder. A lawyer glanced up, annoyed, and waved him away. His mother appeared at his side. "Marcus, what are you doing? You can't interrupt them." "Mom, I think I found something." "About the bug?" Sarah's expression shifted from embarrassment to concern. "Honey, these are experts. They have 25 of the best programmers in the world working on this." "I know, but Dad taught me about patterns, and I think—" "Marcus." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Your father was a brilliant man, and he taught you well. But this isn't something an 11-year-old can solve. Let these people do their jobs." The rejection stung worse because he understood it. Why would anyone listen to a kid when experts were failing? He was just the cleaning lady's son, doing homework in the corner. But as he turned to walk away, he caught sight of Reynolds through the glass, and in that exhausted, desperate face, he saw his father. 3 weeks before the heart attack, the same hollowed eyes, the same weight of impossible expectations. And Marcus knew, if he walked away now, if he stayed silent, because no one would listen to a child, he would regret it forever. This was his chance to do what he couldn't do for his dad. To prove the pattern existed before it was too late. He pulled away from his mother's gentle grip and pushed open the conference room door. The conversation stopped. Every head turned toward him. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Marcus said, his voice smaller than he wanted it to be, "but I think I know how to find your bug." The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Dr. Williams frowned. "Young man, this really isn't the time for—" "The timestamps," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. He walked to the whiteboard where someone had written the latest failure times. "Everyone's been looking at what's failing, but nobody's looking at when it's failing." Reynolds sat up slightly. "What do you mean?" "The failures aren't random, they're scheduled." Marcus picked up a marker with shaking hands and started writing numbers on the board. 3:17 a.m., 7:42 a.m., 11:33 a.m. If you convert these to total minutes from midnight and apply a pattern algorithm, they create coordinates. "Coordinates to what?" Dr. Williams asked, her tone skeptical but no longer dismissive. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I don't have access to your systems, but the pattern is there. My dad taught me to see patterns in code, and this one is deliberate. Someone's leaving breadcrumbs." A developer stood up. "The kid might be onto something. Patricia, what if we run those numbers through our directory structure?" "That's ridiculous," another developer scoffed. "We're talking about a random kid with no programming background making wild guesses while we've been working around the clock." "Actually," Reynolds interrupted quietly, "how do you know about pattern algorithms, son?" Marcus met his eyes. "My father was David Chen. He worked for DataSync Solutions. In this building, before you bought it." The room went very quiet. Several of the older developers exchanged glances. They remembered the scandal, the accusations, the tragic ending. "David Chen was one of the best programmers I ever worked with," an older developer said slowly. He died trying to prove he wasn't responsible for a bug remarkably similar to this one. My dad didn't write that bug, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tears pricking his eyes. He died trying to find who did, and I think whoever is attacking your company now is the same person who attacked his. Reynolds stood up. Dr. Williams, run the numbers. Now. It took 15 minutes of tense silence while developers input the timestamp coordinates into their directory structure search algorithms. Marcus stood by the whiteboard, his mother beside him now, her hand on his shoulder. When the results came back, Dr. Williams's face went white. James, you need to see this. The coordinates led to a hidden partition in the backup servers, a ghost directory that shouldn't exist. Inside was a file called Justice, TXT, and a sophisticated piece of malware designed to trigger transaction failures at precisely calculated intervals. But more damning was the metadata. The file creator, Jennifer Morrison, one of TechForward's senior developers, a woman who had worked at DataSync Solutions 8 months ago. A woman whose husband had been denied a promotion when David Chen received it instead. Oh my God, Dr. Williams whispered. Jennifer's husband. He died of a heart attack 6 months ago. Stress-related. After he was laid off from DataSync following the company's collapse, the pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Jennifer had blamed David Chen for her husband's career setback, had created a bug that destroyed DataSync, got David blamed, watched as the stress killed him. And then, when TechForward bought the old office space, she had applied for a job, been hired based on her credentials, and planted her revenge all over again. But she had made one mistake. She had been arrogant enough to hide a message in her attack pattern, a signature that announced her victory. And that pattern had been her undoing. Security was called. Jennifer Morrison was escorted from the building within the hour, her access revoked, law enforcement contacted. The malware was removed, the systems secured. By 4 a.m., TechForward's transaction processing was back to normal. By morning, the bleeding had stopped. Reynolds found Marcus in the break room where Sarah had taken him to wait, giving him hot chocolate from the kitchen. The CEO looked 10 years younger than he had hours before. The weight of impending disaster lifted from his shoulders. Marcus, he said, sitting down across from the boy, do you understand what you did tonight? Marcus shrugged, suddenly shy. I saw a pattern, like my dad taught me. You saw what 25 expert developers missed. You saved my company. Do you know how much that's worth? I don't really care about the money, sir. I didn't want what happened to my dad to happen to you. Nobody should die because of code they didn't write. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Sarah. Mrs. Chen, I'd like to offer you a position as our facilities manager. 4 times your current salary, full benefits, and a company housing stipend. Sarah's eyes widened. Mr. Reynolds won. I don't know what to say. And Marcus, Reynolds continued, I'm setting up a trust fund for your education. Full ride to any college you choose, plus a technology internship program here at TechForward every summer if you want it. You've got your father's gift for seeing patterns, and that kind of talent deserves to be nurtured. Additionally, he said, his voice growing firmer with decision, I'm establishing the David Chen Foundation for Ethical Programming. Your father was blamed for something he didn't do, destroyed by a system that valued blame over truth. That stops now. The foundation will support developers facing false accusations, fund independent code audits, and advocate for better protections for programmers. Marcus felt tears spilling down his cheeks. Thank you, sir, my dad. He would have liked that. There's one more thing, Reynolds said. I've been reviewing our company culture, and I realize we've created an environment where 25 brilliant people were too focused on individual solutions to see the bigger pattern. Too stressed to think creatively, too blamed to take risks. That's going to change. Starting with making sure everyone knows that tonight, the person who solved our biggest crisis wasn't an MIT graduate or a 20-year veteran. It was an 11-year-old boy who paid attention when everyone else was too busy being an expert. 3 months later, Marcus stood in Tech Forward's new training center, a facility dedicated to teaching young people about programming, pattern recognition, and ethical technology. The walls were covered with motivational quotes, but his favorite was the one above the entrance, words his father had said to him that last day in the cafeteria: "Everything is patterns. When something doesn't make sense, you're not looking at it the right way yet." Reynolds had kept every promise. Sarah now managed a team of 15, had moved into a beautiful apartment in a safe neighborhood, and for the first time since David's death, had stopped worrying about how to pay next month's bills. Marcus attended the state's best STEM magnet school, his full tuition covered, with a trust fund waiting for college that would let him study anywhere he dreamed. But more important than the money was what happened at Tech Forward itself. The company had implemented new policies: mandatory breaks, collaborative problem-solving sessions, protection for whistleblowers, and a culture that valued questions from anyone, regardless of position or age. 3 junior developers had already been promoted after spotting issues senior staff had missed. Jennifer Morrison was serving 18 months for computer fraud and corporate sabotage. During her trial, she had confessed to everything: her anger at David Chen, her deliberate destruction of DataSync, her calculated revenge plot at Tech Forward. The evidence Marcus had helped uncover made the case airtight. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the David Chen Foundation's first major initiative, a review of the DataSync case that officially cleared David's name, with a public apology and compensation to his family. Marcus's father was posthumously recognized as a victim, not a perpetrator. His reputation, so carefully destroyed, was finally restored. On the opening day of the training center, Marcus cut the ribbon alongside Reynolds, Dr. Williams, and his mother. But before the ceremony, he placed something at the base of the memorial plaque they had installed: a worn laptop, his father's laptop, and the pattern-matching game that had taught him to see what others missed. "You were right, Dad," he whispered. "Everything is patterns. And the most important pattern is that truth always finds a way through, even if it takes an 11-year-old kid to speak it out loud." As the audience applauded and reporters snapped photos, Marcus Chen smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned that age is just a number, that wisdom can come from anywhere, and that sometimes the smallest voice in the room is saying the most important thing. He had proven that experts, no matter how experienced, can miss what a child sees clearly, that titles and degrees matter less than curiosity and courage, that the pattern everyone else overlooked was there all along, waiting for someone brave enough to point it out. And in doing so, he had not only saved a company and cleared his father's name, but had changed an entire industry's approach to problem-solving. Because on that Friday night, when 25 developers couldn't stop a millionaire from losing his company, an 11-year-old boy showed them all that the answer they needed was written in plain sight, in the pattern of when things went wrong, rather than what went wrong. Sometimes the person who saves the day isn't the one with the most impressive resume. Sometimes it's the one with the courage to see differently, speak up anyway, and trust that the pattern they've found is real, even when everyone else calls it impossible. Marcus had found that pattern, and in finding it, he had discovered something even more important: his own voice, his own worth, and his own power to change the world, one line of code at a time.